Yes, alhamdulillah. What when I give longer Dhamma talks, my throat sometimes gets dry. Have to replenish the water. Because these bodies are actually like more than 75 or 80% water. And we're always breathing out water vapor that when we talk and other things. So, and, all doctors tell you that you're supposed to drink a lot of water, right? Most people don't drink enough water to replenish what they're giving out. And so that kind of dehydration is a cause of a lot of, problems.
Bhakti Prema is bringing the water.
Okay. So while we're waiting, just should automatically always just come back to the body whenever you're thinking, what's going on? Boom. What's going on is the body sitting and breathing. That's fail safe. That's ground zero. Just take a couple of deep, slow breaths. Just breathing in, letting go of the past and future. Breathing out, sitting here and now. The best medicine. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Buddhaya. Okay, friends, want to continue our discussion this morning uh, about the importance of getting centered in the body, because really, again, as I've already mentioned, the body is the home for the mind, and the mind is operating through the subtle nervous system, and the body has natural wisdom. Look at when you're in the womb for 9 months, this baby was developing. There was no IBM computer hooked up to it saying develop the kidneys, develop the liver, do this, interconnect all these systems. No. It was natural wisdom. And this body was made, well, I wouldn't say made perfectly, but, all these intricate systems of the body, one of the most highly developed organisms that we know of, as of yet, of course. But so the body knows how to heal itself, right? You got the immune system. You got, there's other kind of early warning systems going on. But when we were born or we lost that connection to the body, we lost that sensitivity. The mind lost its sensitivity because now its energy is going outward and it's not connected, intimately connected to the subtler vibrations in the body. And it gets overridden by our thoughts of greed, hatred, and delusion. And so when we lose that happiness of the present moment, that contentment of the mind being in the present moment and being connected to those organic vibrations of the body, then it has to replace it with substituted happiness. So if the mind is no longer feeding off the artesian well of intrinsic life force, which is in the electrons, protons, neutrons, electrons of the atom, that's really like where the life force is. Because it's the number of electrons going around an atom that creates matter, right? Any chemists or biologists out there? Okay, so it's not theoretical. This is science. But when you lose that connection to the body, then the body interferes with the natural healing. So just an example, okay? So when I want to say when you were when I was a teenager, right? Or when you're young. It's because you want to be like a tough guy and hang out with the older guys, or maybe they egged you on to start smoking. So innocently, you kind of take your first puff on a cigarette. But your friends say, "Come on, wimp, take another one." So you tough it out, and then you get hooked on smoking. And then after maybe some months, you start. What's that? Is the body trying to tell you something? That's not good for you. That's a natural wisdom. But the mind says, shut up. Right? Or with anything else, whether it's food, junk food, whether it's any type of sort of addiction that causes some kind of harm for the body. And the mind is always a jump ahead of itself. The mind causes most of the problems for our body. Look at all the accidents. Almost every single accident you've ever had, check up. You could remember this tonight when you go home. Oh, yeah, I wasn't looking. I tripped over something. Okay. So the mind wasn't in the present moment. And you're walking along the street, caught up in thought. Mind is already where you want to go. And you step in a pothole and twist your ankle. Or step in a pile of dog doo-doo and swear. And blame the person with the dog. Oh, you should have cleaned up. No, you should have been mindful. You could have avoided stepping in it, right? Okay. Driving the car, right? Lost in thought, almost hit somebody on a bicycle. Didn't see the car coming out. But normally we always try to blame the other outside for our problems and accidents. But when it comes down to it, it's our mindfulness of not being awake, not being alert, not being grounded and centered. So this comes back to, really the Four Noble Truths. So we talked yesterday about the Dhamma being sort of the laws of nature, but specifically in the Buddhist teaching, all the Dhamma fits into the Four Noble Truths. Because again, the Buddha wasn't interested in who created the world, how it was created, how long it took to create it, and so on, like some other dharmas or religions, that's important to them. It wasn't important to the Buddha. What was important to the Buddha is understanding how people create suffering for themselves. And not only for themselves, for others too. And oh, my water. Oh, yeah. Leave the suffering on my throat. Uma pensamento. Okay. Got to replace that water vapor. So the Four Noble Truths, the truth of suffering. Then the cause of suffering. Then the cessation of suffering. Then the path leading to the cessation of suffering. So this is a hypothesis. The Buddha was a great doctor. This is how doctors treat their patients, right? So you go to the doctor and the doc says, what are your symptoms? Oh, I got a pain over here, and this and this and that. Ah. Then he says, well, after treating a lot of people, and he said, well, that's, he prescribes, he says, that you have this. This is the cause of the suffering. Not enough water. Or, whatever. So he sees the symptoms, and he determines what the cause of that is, and then he prescribes a medicine to overcome the cause, to neutralize the cause. And that medicine is the Dhamma. So anyway, there's 3 levels of suffering. The first is the obvious physical level of suffering that's connected with the bodies, these bodies, and other material things too, but most importantly, the body that is subject to sickness, old age, decay, broken bones, lots of pain, and death. So would you agree that a lot of people suffer because of those things? They suffer physically and they suffer mentally. But the mental suffering is coming from the physical suffering, having lost somebody. Oh, so-and-so died, and they were weeping and wailing because they couldn't let it go. Or so many other reasons. So anyway, the physical level of suffering, and this is connected to impermanence, because everything that arises is subject to cessation and disappearance at the slightest notice. And we cannot control it. And everything changes. This is one of the other laws of nature, along with the law of karma that we talked about yesterday, the law of impermanence, that everything is changing. And that goes down to the very molecular, cellular, and atomic level. And all those, atoms and electrons are constantly changing. And physics is doing a lot of, modern physics is doing a lot of research and tests with machines, and you're coming up with some really fantastic, research and evidence that shows that. Even like quantum physics, the matter is just basically energy, changing energies. So, but anyway, so that first level of suffering, connected with the material world and impermanence, which includes like sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. When we read so many suttas, that's always the way the Buddha, mentioned that. And then the second level of suffering is not getting what you want and getting what you don't want. Now, this is also connected to that material level, because everybody wants health, but they get sickness. Everybody, wants things to be permanent and not last, but we know everything changes. Even your relationships with people change over the life. People go through many, 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 many changes of relationships. Cars, houses, pets, everything. You can't name one thing that hasn't changed, probably, except the breathing body. Of course, that's changing, but it hasn't gone away. So even though the body is constantly changing internally and even externally, the fact that it's actually here, that far from beneath your nose, is the only thing that, remains a kind of a constant. But anyway, not getting what you want, getting what you don't want, that's also connected with impermanence. And, dissatisfaction. And because of everything changing, we have to keep changing the objects of our desire. That's why desires cannot be satisfied, because you get one kind of desire, whether it's a physical relationship with somebody or mental relationship, or it's any other items and so on. They're bound to change, and then we suffer when we don't accept the change. So not accepting impermanence is one of those grounds for change. And that's why impermanence, anicca, is one of the three characteristics of all phenomena, that everything is subject to change. So anyway, there's three levels of suffering. The second level being that mental level of discontentment. And the third is after the Buddha said, birth, sickness, old age, disease, and death is suffering. Not getting what you want, getting what you don't want is suffering. Then he said, in short, actually it's kind of long, but in short, the five aggregates of clinging are suffering. So this is more of it's not theoretical, but it's, people think of five aggregates, they think it's some pie in the sky. No, it's your life. It's everything that's connected with your body and mind belongs within those five aggregates. So the physical body, one, all the feelings that are going on in your body, the pleasant, painful, and neutral sensations that are constantly whizzing through. And then the perceptions, your identity to those objects, means the language and the way you perceive them, the thoughts about them, the memories about them. All these things are in a constant state of change and flux. And then even your consciousness, in the sense of yourself, that's also changing. Because when you were a young baby, maybe you didn't even have a sense of self until you were 6 months old or something like that. I think I hark back to I think I mentioned it last night. Some of you mothers, how long did it take after you gave the baby its name at birth until the baby finally looked at you? So now with that first looking, it's getting a sense of self. It's identifying this name that used to be just floating through the air somewhere. Johnny, 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 but they never looked for 6 months. And finally, Johnny, no. It's me. And then that keeps on changing as the baby grows older into a young teenager, for example, especially whatever, right? Teenager. And then as you grow up through all the stages of life. So anyway, those 5 aggregates that we identify as being ourself, they're constantly changing. And they're suffering because largely we cannot control it. The Buddha once said that it'd be better to regard your body as yourself, because your body, you can see the body lasting for, 20, 30, 50, 80, even 100 years. There's a continuity. It's not constant, but it's it's still there. But he said the mind is changing even faster than the body. But again, we're not able to really see how quickly our mind changes. I mean, we can, but not at the subatomic level anyway. Because our consciousness is dull. But the Buddha could do it because he had developed his mind to the very, very highest degree. And actually, meditation is like a scientist going into the laboratory and looking through a microscope. So this body is the laboratory, and the mind is the microscope. So you focus the eyes, and with your attention, which is part of the mind, you can focus it on your breath, for example, or anywhere. Focus it on your hands touching together. And if you keep it there long enough, you start to notice more and more, vibrations, sensations. And so that's like turning up the power of a microscope. But you no longer see the outside surface of an object, you see within it. And that is how you develop that deeper wisdom and understanding into how quickly the mind operates and how it's interconnected with everything. And you can also see how that law of karma is operating between sensations and our thoughts and our reactions. Normally our mind is too dull and too slow. And also it's half asleep most of the time. And so we're not able to see those kind of changes. But anyway, I wanted to now come back. And so we're talking about those 3 levels of suffering. And then the cause of the suffering is, usually it's called greed, hatred, and delusion, or lobha, dosa, moha. But delusion basically is ignorance. So actually, ignorance is the ultimate cause of suffering, because greed and hatred arise because of ignorance. Ignorance means not understanding the truth, not understanding the true nature of our mind. And I like to say, ignorance started with the disconnection from the body. That's really the descent into suffering, is the disconnection from the body. And the mind focusing outwardly, losing that intimate moment-to-moment connection with the subtler vibrations that are going through the nervous system. But so that ignorance basically is not understanding the mind. And because of that, we think that happiness is outside of ourselves. Because we lost the happiness that's inside of ourselves, we're trying to bring it in from outside. That's ignorance. And greed is the cause of hatred. That's why in that progression, the evolution of suffering is because of the ignorance, losing the contact with the intrinsic happiness of the present moment awareness. We have to substitute it for bringing in something to smell, something to see, something to hear, something to taste, something to feel some other person's body, not your own. Or think of fantasies. That's how we get our, kicks, so to speak. But all those things are, subject to change, and we cannot really control them. So anyway, the hatred arises. Anything that blocks your desire, you get angry or hatred. That's why hatred is the last one, and it's the easiest one to overcome. Greed is much harder. So, ignorance is the cause of greed, and greed is the cause of hatred. But, they're all working in the, tandem like that. So if greed, hatred, and delusion is the cause of suffering, what would be the end of suffering? Deductive reasoning here. The cause of suffering would be, the cessation of suffering would be the elimination of ignorance, greed, and hatred. And then how to achieve that? So that's the medicine of the Eightfold Path, the path leading to the cessation of suffering. See, the Buddha had a scientific mind. I mean, a lot of people think the Buddha was a founder of a great religion. To me, no. He was a scientist, a body and mind scientist. And that's the way he presented his Dhamma. After the Buddha got enlightened, he was sitting enjoying his enlightenment, for several weeks. And then finally he started to get up, and he was going to, go find his old, ascetic buddies and teach them the Dhamma. But as he was getting up from his seat and starting, some ascetic came by. And the Buddha's face was glowing and probably emitting some aura. And he looked, like kind of like divine. And this ascetic said, "Who are you? Are you a human being? Are you a deva? Are you a god?" And he said, "No, I'm awake." Upaka, right? I'm awake. That's what he said. And I was shocked. He kind of shook his head up. I thought the guy was crazy, Awake? What is awake? And but anyway, so So the beginning of the practice of Dhamma, the start of the journey, is right understanding. Like if you don't know how to do something, normally you have to do some research, right? So now everybody's using AI and we're doing deep dives and finding out, all this information. And usually the first way you learn is by either reading books or hearing somebody talk about a subject. Is it? And then by doing that, it may prick your interest. Hey, that sounds interesting. That's pretty cool. That sounds doable. And so that sparks your interest then to actually start, practicing. But how many people have gotten initially interested in something just by hearing somebody mentioning something or reading an article once, and you thought, oh yeah, I gotta try that. And then 30 minutes later, you forgot whatever you heard. So that's why there's 3 levels of understanding. There's the intellectual understanding. And then there's the understanding that comes through reflection, repeated reflection on that, thinking about it. And that's why right thought is the second step of the Eightfold Path, right thought. So the first step is Sammaditthi, right understanding, but that has 3 levels, as I've been mentioning. So the intellectual level, and then the level of thinking about it. So you hear about the law of karma. Oh, karma, yeah, that's cool. That sounds cool. Yeah. But then you think about it. Go back in your life. What happened when you told a lie? Did you worry about getting caught? Did you lose some sleep? Your mother and father were going to find out you stole a cigarette from them? I'm talking from my own experience, by the way. And so we suffer a lot worrying, having fear and worry or remorse from things that we've done. But normally people don't like to think about it. But that's reflection on the Dhamma. So it makes more sense. And you realize every single thing you've done had some kind of an effect. And so it's no longer just a pie in the sky belief, karma, karma, karma. Now it's something real that you can relate to. So that's the gradual accumulation of that right understanding. It goes from just intellectual head understanding down more into the heart. And that in turn increases your desire to practice more. And then finally, the last level of understanding is after a long time of practicing meditation and all the other steps of the Eightfold Path, you begin to have deep insights. And especially the insights that lead to attaining the Magga Phala or the path and the fruits. But even before that, just the deep insights themselves are, those are like sort of aha moments. You've been practicing Sila, the right understanding kind of helps you to start practicing Sila. And then as you see that your guilt, worry, remorse, and fear, and people stop blaming you so much, and after 6 months or so, a lot of that is weakened down. Oh yeah, okay, that's right. Following precepts works. And then if you broke one and you see the effect of it, you see that connection. And so it wants you to motivate you to practice even more. So the right understanding is those 3 levels of understanding. And then there's the right thought, which is thinking about the right understanding. As I've already mentioned about that. But there's 4 levels of right thought. The the thought of sort of lightening up your life, not having so many things that burden your life, unnecessary things. It's called the thought of renunciation, but it doesn't mean becoming a monk or a nun necessarily. It just means lightening up your life so it's not so burdened. Instead of having 10 cats to worry about and grieve when they die, you only have 2 or 3. Or having 50 house plants, it doesn't allow you to go on a retreat. You have to hire somebody to water them. Break it down to a couple. You know what I mean? Get my drift? Okay. So, you had a big house when you had 3 or 4 or 5 kids, and now you're an empty nester. Sell the house, downsize, make your life less burdened. So that's this aspect of the thought that how nice it would be not to be so burdened, have more time to go on vacations and so many other things. So, and then the thought of non-ill will. Some people have all this anger and hatred build up and resentment, and they're always criticizing everybody and all that. It's a pretty yucky state. I mean, even if you've been there yourself for some periods of time, and then you overcome that, you see how freeing that is, not to be burdened by this ill will towards people that don't agree with you or hurt you in one way or another, and so on. And that goes together with the third one about the compassion or non-cruelty. So these 3 things, the greed, hatred, and delusion, they're connected with those 3 types of right thought: the thought of non-greed, the thought of non-ill will, and the thought of non-cruelty. So now you got right view and you got right thought. Now what are you going to do? Clean up your tongue. That means practicing right speech. Now I want to come back for a minute because I have a personal, experience with these aspects of transitioning from the intellectual understanding to the right thought, or from right view to right thought. And when I was young, I was planning a trip to go to India, but not to find a guru, just for all the fun and games. Because I heard I was in the army, stationed in Europe before that, and all these American, European hippies were coming back from India, and they were telling me all these great stories that happened along the way in Afghanistan and India, and trekking in the Himalayas, living naked on the beach in Goa, smoking all the best hashish. Oh yeah, so that interested me. So after I got out of the army, I decided that's what I'm going to do. Save some money in the army, and then I'm going to, go to India. So I took this course in world religions because at that time you couldn't fly directly to India from America. You had to go through Europe. You had to go through, it wasn't just one flight. You had to take 2 or 3 flights to get over to India, and then there weren't even that many. So most people went overland. But so I took a course in world religions because I wanted to learn something about the religions of the different countries I would go through. Like I thought about going to Israel and working on a kibbutz for a while, learn something about that. And then going through some Mideast Muslim countries. And then the Hinduism. And then Buddhism. And then at the end of that course, or near the end, we had to write a term paper. You all know what term papers are, right? On the one that interested us the most. And I chose Buddhism. I don't really know why, but just a little book that I read in a textbook. See, in those days, this was 1970, 71. There was hardly any temples in this country, Buddhist temples. There was hardly any books at the time, maybe in a university library or in Riverside Public Library where I lived, there was like 3 books on Buddhism. Now there's 3,000. But anyway, so it was pretty sketchy. But anyway, I wrote this paper and I got an A+ on it. The teacher wrote on it. She was impressed with my knowledge of Buddhism. 10 years later, I found it in the attic when I came back home from Asia and read it. And, kid stuff. But anyway, so that pricked my interest. And I read about the Four Noble Truths. I read about karma, about rebirth, about suffering, about meditation. Wow. How come I haven't heard about this? I didn't hear the president talking about this. I didn't hear my mother and father talking about this. Where's this been? So I got excited. But after the course, there was no temples to go to. There was no one knew anything. It was just a cult. In most Americans' eyes, Buddhism, it was just, they had no idea what it was, except for seeing the burning monks in Vietnam who were self-immolating themselves. And that was usually a negative kind of thing. Wasn't seen as anything good. So, or it was seen as a brainwash. So anyway, I quickly forgot about what I had read, and was planning my trip to Asia, India, and so I wound up, going to parties and all these negative thoughts. So that right understanding didn't do him any good because I didn't go on thinking about it. I didn't go on reflecting about it. Of course, later on, like now a year and a half later, once I got to India, having survived a month in prison in Afghanistan, I was lucky to get out with my life. And I realized, I got to do something. My head was clouded from all the drugs and stuff. I got to clean out. I didn't know how. But then I was on my way to Nepal to go trekking in the Himalayas. But up there in the Himalayas, I was sitting down by a river and somebody came down and sat down and started talking about meditation. And I heard that word meditation. That's what I got to do. I remembered the talk about meditation from that course. And also I actually practiced a little bit of transcendental meditation. About in 1971, it was very popular in America. So I paid my $35, got my mantra, and that was before I took this course in world religion. But anyway, I knew there was something in meditation, but I wasn't prepared to, go whole hog with it. So, but anyway, so I went to this meditation course, and there we practiced all those aspects of wisdom. We had a book, we read a chapter in a book, then the Lama would give a lecture on that, and then we'd immediately sit and meditate and reflect and think about what we read. And that was like every day doing that. And that combination really seemed to work, And at the end of that course, all I wanted to do is become a monk and really get into meditation. I had a, very powerful experience. So I'm just saying that to show the connection between just intellectual understanding, and then you have to back that up with contemplating it, and then even in meditation, as we did using meditation. Because, you could think about a topic, while you're sitting down reading the newspaper or, drinking a cup of coffee and the cat is jumping up in your lap and so on. You could be thinking about something, but it's not going to probably go very deep. But when you're sitting still and having quieted the mind through some deep breathing, something else, and then you start Oh, yes, the Four Noble Truths, 3 levels of suffering. Okay. Karma. And your mind is a little bit clearer. So now you can think about some of these connections and the cause and effect things that have gone on without being interfered by going to sleep or, other types of negative thoughts. So that's also the connection between, using thinking while you're in a state of meditation when the mind is clear, and it goes a lot deeper. Anyway, so coming back now to right understanding, right thought. And part of the right thought is about thinking about the law of karma too. And it's not limited just to those 3 types of thought, but it's thinking about the Dhamma. And so think back when you told your best friend's secret and they find out. Did you suffer on account of that? Or having told lies? Having flipped somebody the finger? Or other kinds of negative actions? Abuse somebody with the body? Or just even harboring negative thoughts toward, hatred and anger towards people? How can it make you sick? And how it affects your body? So, so then you practice the precepts. So the right speech and right action, it covers like the 5 precepts. And the 5 precepts is like having a policeman in your mind. Let's say you're in a city, right? And all of a sudden the electricity goes out. And so everybody's coming to the lights and there's no one there. So everybody's making illegal turns, cutting people off, speeding. But then a cop comes out and stands in the middle. And everybody stops and obeys, as long as the policeman is there. But when the policeman goes for lunch, then everybody again. So normally people don't have a policeman in their mind, conscience, because they're just acting off their impulses. Somebody says something to you, I don't know, or something like that. Or a mosquito lands on you, and you scratch yourself and draw blood. Damn it. Excuse me. But so, you reflect on these things. And so you see how that following the precepts helps to reduce a lot of unnecessary, especially mental suffering in your life, but physical too, because people are going to come after you to stab you or to shoot you if you told a lie, or you slept with their girlfriend or boyfriend, whatever, or you stole something from them. So, but people normally don't stop and think about that because they're under the influence of these impulses in a quick satisfaction. They don't think about the long-term consequences of what they're doing. And that's why part of right speech, the Buddha advised even his son, Rahula, whenever you're about to do something or say something, you should think to yourself, what am I about to do now? Is it going to be harmful for myself or for others or both? And if you see it would be, then don't do it. And then even if you started it while you're doing it, if you catch yourself, then you reflect, is what I'm doing right now going to be harmful for myself, both, or others? Stop it. And then if you went through the whole thing and did that, reflect afterwards, is this now going to bring me pain and suffering? There's a good chance of it. Don't do it again. Determine not to do it again. So this is how the Buddha advised his son Rahula, who later quite quickly actually became an arahant. So that's the way we have to reflect, use those reflections to, before we, do something or say something or even think. But normally we don't have the ability to do that because we're unmindful. That's why practicing the precepts is normally not successful unless you meditate. It means unless you develop mindfulness, at least some degree of mindfulness, and some degree of being more centered. That's why, so in the Eightfold Path, the right speech and the right action, and then the right livelihood, that's also earning your living that wouldn't cause you to break any of those precepts, either directly or even indirectly. But we know now that in this day and age, it's hard to find a job that somehow doesn't, cross the line in terms of, crooked business practices, not telling the whole truth about, products or even medicines and so on, everything is so money based and so on that people, just because of that, they're subject to, telling lies and not revealing the truths and all kind of deceptions, and so it's easier just to do that, but then you suffer the consequences later. And now I don't like to, be political or anything, but anybody's been watching the news the last couple of weeks. So even our president now, he's worrying about going to hell. How many have read that? And I came across that because I look at the internet news sometimes just to get an idea what's happening, used for Dhamma talks. And he was saying, I got to make this peace between Ukraine and Russia. If I can, maybe I'll get a ticket into heaven. He says, I've been thinking about that lately, and I really want to go to heaven. But he says, I know I haven't been so cool, So he's worried about that. So that's a good thing, but I don't think it's going to help him. Excuse me, I don't want to step on anybody's toes. I might get shot. So it's pretty crazy out there in the world. But so the the practicing even the livelihood and the precepts, so you can go home at night and say, before you go to sleep, I haven't hurt a flea. I didn't tell any lies. I didn't speak badly to anybody. I didn't do anything else that would break any of those precepts. So you can sleep and have a good night's sleep. So and especially that's valid, right livelihood for younger people who have their life before them, and they're thinking about what to do. You really have to think carefully about it. And not being driven just by the money factor, because, as the Beatles song went, money can't buy you love, money can't buy you happiness. It's only your free consciousness that's going to buy you anything you would consider a deep level of well-being. So, but in order to accomplish all those things, that's why the last three steps of the Eightfold Path are right mindfulness, right concentration, and right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. To accomplish all of the above. So the right effort is the effort to abandon negative, unwholesome states of mind that come into your mind, and the ability to create wholesome states that you may not yet have. So you have to be mindful when they arise, and you have to mindfully let go of the negative states, and you have to then ideally substitute the negative states with the wholesome states. So let's say you're entertaining a thought of revenge about some person that hurt you. So instead of you see these thoughts of revenge, and instead, even though it's painful, may they be well and happy. Substitute those thoughts of negative thoughts for more wholesome ones. Because if they were well and happy, they wouldn't do things that to cause us suffering. People do things that cause us suffering because they themselves are not truly well and happy in their own minds. So and then, going out of your way to then cultivate those wholesome qualities, such as learning how to get up in the morning and meditate, rather than just sleeping an extra 40 weeks. Because that extra 30 minutes of meditation is going to be more rejuvenating and refreshing and worthwhile than an extra half an hour of sleep in most cases. You wake up and do a few yoga stretches to get the molecules vibrating, and you overcome that sleepiness very quick. And so to meditate. So like that's how that those 8 steps of the Noble Eightfold Path, how they it's depicted as a wheel. So the Dharma wheel, I think you've all seen the Dharma wheel, the 8-spoke Dharma wheel. And just like a bicycle wheel, if you have a bicycle that has some broken spokes in it, and you get on it to ride it, what would normally happen? It'd be kind of wobbly, right? And if you ride it long enough, it may just collapse on itself. So the same way, if some of those steps of the Eightfold Path are kind of wobbly, or they're not sort of strengthened evenly, and they help support each other, then that wheel will roll evenly to the goal. So that's how we have to see that. Right understanding is hoping the right thoughts, and then that understanding of the Dhamma then helps you to practice the Sila, and practicing Sila helps you to gain concentration, and through concentration you gain the wisdom. Because the practice of meditation there's 3 levels to the meditation. And they are mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. So we've already been talking about mindfulness. That means learning how to bring your mind more into the present moment and be aware of what your body is doing, be aware of what kind of thoughts are going through your mind, and being aware of the hindrances. So, when you notice yourself in meditation and getting sleepy, just don't sit there for the rest of the hour going like this. Stand up, take some deep, slow breaths. Try to overcome that sleepiness. But the sleepiness feels so good. Because, the pain kind of temporarily goes away. Your morbid thoughts go away. You're just, in sleep. But it's a dead end. It's a dead end. So you have to, the right effort is the effort to try to get out of that sleepiness by standing up, going out for a walk, drink some water, do a few yoga stretches, do some walking meditation. Actually, how many of you enjoyed that walking meditation you did this morning? So especially people who have more trouble in sitting, whether it's because of physical pains of sitting or it's a sleepiness, walking is I would say it's equally as good, at least in the beginning stages. And walking is good for awareness, is a more open awareness, not necessarily deep jhanic level concentration. But most people are not at that level anyway. So, and it's out there in the world where you're creating karma. We'll talk more about that tomorrow. And so developing the kind of mindfulness, especially the mindfulness of the body, is one of the most worthwhile practices, because it doesn't really entail sitting for long periods and, trying to ignore, blot out the world, so to speak, or, it's not just sitting still and learning how to be mindful in your actions. So an example, if you have an itch on your head, now most people, if you got an itch, they'd probably kind of just go like that real quick, right? I mean, next time you get one, okay? Instead, a mindful person, when the itch starts to come up, you'd be aware of unpleasant sensation is there. Okay, don't get excited, it's no big deal. Don't rush. Okay, just watch it. Okay. And then, if you decide you want to get rid of it after tolerating it for 30 minutes or, 30 seconds, but then mindfully, don't rush. Mindfully, lifting, 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 lifting. And just before you do that, the itch disappeared by itself. Or the fly disappeared. And lowering, 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 lowering. And so how much energy did you waste lifting your up and down when it's going to disappear anyway? Now, I'll tell you another story. You want to hear another story? Okay, when I was a young gung-ho monk, my first couple of years as a monk in Sri Lanka, I was living in these places, austere places and out in the open. And I was meditating under the eaves of a temple. And I was, and meditating. All of a sudden, I felt something fall on my ear. Something long. It was, going around my ear like that. Then I thought, what is that? I said, oh, it's nothing. Just feeling, because I was practicing 4 foundations of mindfulness. And I was just saying, okay, thinking, don't worry about it. But then it started munching my ear. And it started to get red hot. And I was just, trying to relax. Okay, it's no big deal. And I was just saying, feeling. And then, but there was a man who lived near that place who had a little tea shop. And this man used to bring me hot tea in the morning. This was like, I would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and meditate for an hour. And then I'd go on Pindapata. So the man came to bring me my hot tea in the morning. Then as we got near, he looked at my ear. Handra. What's that? And he was saying, monk, and get my attention. But before that, actually, that was after. So when this thing was eating my ear, after about 10 minutes, I came to the conclusion, I better check this out, So, but slowly, I didn't rush. I slowly lifted my arm like this. And a big, long, hairy centipede, about 10 inches long, a red one, was whisked off, and he walked away. And then about that time is when this man came and saw my ear was all red. So he ran home. He was in Unawatuna, where the mountain, that herb mountain is. It's famous for herbs. So these people knew all about herbs. So he went home and he made a potion out of herbs, mashed them up, mixed it with some other stuff, and brought back like a poultice thing and put it on my ear. It was cooling, cool some of the fire. And then after about 30 minutes, it drew the poison out. And then, but anyway, so I just said that as an example about, how you can learn to observe pain and remain more calm and relaxed, and so on. And that happened another time, even with a scorpion. There was a rock that I used to sit and meditate on. It was higher than me, so I had to put my hands up like this and pull myself up a little bit on this rock at Unawatuna. It was facing the Indian Ocean. I had an unobstructed view of the whole Indian Ocean down to the South Pole. From there, it was a wonderful place to meditate. But I put my finger down on a scorpion and it bit into my finger. So the same thing happened. But this time it was in the afternoon and I was going down to this person's tea shop because he used to make me afternoon tea. And then by that time, the poison was going like this. I could see a red mark slowly moving up the arm. And then when he was bringing the tea, you saw that again. And then he said, what is that? I said, the scorpion. And so he did the same thing. He went, made up a potion, came back, put it on there. By that time, it was up to here. And then I saw it moving back down after he put the POTUS on there. After about 10 minutes, it started to go back down because it was pulling the stuff out. But those kind of, I took those things as a challenge, not to other people be afraid. I'm never going up there. There's too many bugs and stuff. But then you limit yourself to a lot of experiences. Now, I'm not recommending that to you. Okay, I was just a crazy monk in those days. Now I'm even crazier. But, so that was the replace the water. So that's the that Eightfold Path. That is the practice of weakening those elements in our mind, all those habit patterns that keep our mind in a very narrow state and contracted around the ego. And coming back to these realizations now, so the right understanding, wisdom, that meditation wisdom is understanding what are called the Tilakkhana, or the 3 characteristics. I mentioned the 5 aggregates, right? I kind of mentioned them, and I didn't go fully into them. But, it's what we cling to. And those aggregates are always changing. And actually, the feelings and perceptions, these are the memories in the mind that actually keep our mind caught. Now, how many people have heard the famous avocado story? Nobody? One person? Orpin? You've heard that. Famous avocado story. What is it? It's another story from my experience about clinging to feelings and perceptions and how much suffering it causes us. So when I was young, I lived in Riverside, California, which was a center for growing oranges and avocados in California. And we lived near to an avocado orchard. And my mother used to serve avocados as a salad 2 or 3 times a week in a season. And we could literally just go out and pick avocados that had fallen off the trees. But for some reason, I hated avocados. And I thought avocados were evil. And so just when my mother told me in the morning, we are having avocados for dinner, we need to get a couple of avocados, a chill went up my spine. Those chills that kind of like that. Just hearing the sound avocado. And I started worrying, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And so we had a cat, and for some reason liked avocados. So I used to go hunt for the cat and let him inside the house because it was an indoor-outdoor cat. So a lot of times you're outside. So before dinner time, I'd go find the cat and bring him inside. And he used to sit under the kitchen table. And so just when the mother brought the avocados, then I saw them, another chill went up my spine. And when I brought it up to near the nose and had to smell it, sometimes I would, like a gag reflex. And then when I actually put it on the tongue and tasted it, sometimes once or twice, I actually vomited. But usually it was just more of a strong kind of gagging. And the hair would stand up in like that. And so I suffered, I think, 5 ways from those avocados. Just by hearing the sound avocado, by seeing it, smelling it, tasting it. The only way I didn't suffer is I rubbed it on my arm. I didn't feel any kind of negative reaction. But otherwise, I suffered 5 ways because I was clinging to the idea that avocados were horrible. But my mother, brother, and father, they loved avocados. They were like wolfing them down. And I was sitting there staring at my plate. And whenever the mother and father weren't looking, I would feed the cat underneath. And then my mother wouldn't let us watch TV until we finished our dinner. Because in those days, in the 1950s and 60s, families only had one TV in the house, usually a black and a white one, in the den. And so the rest of the family would go in and watch, Ozzie and Harriet and, Leave It to Beaver and all these famous programs of the 50s and 60s. And I was sitting there staring at my plate. Anyway, I'd feed the cat the rest of the avocado. And then I would take my plate in. Look, Ma, I finished my dinner. And she would say, good little boy. But what did I do? I told a lie to my mother. My gosh. So that's what clinging to our beliefs does. It leads people to telling lies, killing, and so many other negative actions. Now, that's not the end of the story.
This morning you had avocado for breakfast.
Yeah, but you see, I ate a lot. And I didn't even mix it with food. So the end of the story is after I went to India and after I was studying yoga, and in the yoga ashram, the teacher was extolling the virtues of avocados. It was one of the best fruits like they're doing now, even, on TV, but this was like 50 years ago. And I was learning meditation about the mind and how the mind creates its suffering because of our clinging to our views and so on. So I thought, I'm going to test this dumb. And so I got a bag of avocados, which is in South India, and I started to force myself to eat them. So first I had to mix it with some other food, hold my nose. And first few times I had this kind of gagging reaction. But I kept on saying, avocados are good. Avocados are good. It's all in the mind. It's all in the mind. And little by little, the few days went on, those reactions got, less and less. And then I could stop mixing it with other food and take the hand off my nose. And little by little, I could start eating it by itself. Now, I didn't immediately like them, but at least I wasn't having a negative reaction. But I knew that avocados were a good, source of, cholesterol, all that stuff, good for you. So, and then after a while, I began to like them, and now I love them. So everywhere I go, people always feed me avocados because they've heard that story before. So I'm just saying that to show that we can change our beliefs about things. But everybody has their likes and dislikes, right? You go in a museum, some people are praising Picasso and somebody else is saying, there's a bunch of, and then or everything else, beliefs in everything. Music, people fight over music, right? Some people don't like hillbilly music. Other people don't like long hair music. Whatever it is, anything, foods. People will fight over that and actually, knock each other out or kill over clinging to their beliefs of what is wrong or right. But those are not absolute values. Those are created in the mind due to our conditioning, largely from when we were a child, but as you grow up too. But those ideas can change. But normally we don't give them time to change because we're too heavily invested in them. And we pick up these bad habits and then they become so strong we can't stop them, like smoking or drugs or other things. And it winds up ruining people's lives when they're just it's all in their mind. These things are all in the mind. But, and even though psychologists may tell them and give them all these, cognitive exercises, this and that, those at best may help a little bit, but they usually don't go to the very root of the problem. Because these habits are just molecular, electromagnetic energy. They're protons, neutrons, electrons revolving around atoms. And how can you get to them? Except through awareness of them. And being aware of the impulses that are occurring on the subtler levels that normally we are not aware of. That's where the meditation comes in. Is that the meditation helps you to develop a deeper level of awareness. So the mind, our thoughts, feelings, these aggregates of feeling, perception, and volition. So the feeling is just the initial unpleasant feeling that arises. But it's followed immediately by the perception of it. So the perception is the mental picture or memory of a vibration. Like the avocado. Just my mother saying we're having avocados tonight. Just the word, the mind has fixed this idea, this picture of what an avocado looks like. And from my past experiences has fixed it in there as something that's the enemy. And it occurs automatically. You don't have to think about it. It just like Google, right? You type in a couple of letters and Google is second guessing you and giving you 10 possibilities of what you're looking for. So our brain is working at that high speed too, but we don't see it. So the feeling, so the Vedana, the feeling pleasant, painful, or neutral, it's just the initial reaction of the mind. It gets attracted to certain things. So my mind heard avocados and I have an aversion. But if you said chocolate ice cream, then there would be attraction. And the same for so many other things. You hear the sound of a lion roaring and you get scared. If you hear the sound of a hummingbird, you might get happy or something, or whatever. And that perception is simply the memory of what that vibration did to you at one point in your life. Like the young baby, the first time you grabbed a cat's tail and the cat scratched it. Now you see a cat as an enemy or a source of pain and have fear about it. The same way as fear of heights. So many people have obsessions, right? Fear of heights, fear of the dark, fear of this. These are all just accumulated memories. In only some cases, in like hypnotic regression, they can actually uncover the experiences where these originated sometimes. And then once you see it, you're able to overcome it. And so that's similar to what happens in meditation. when you reflect on your reactions and you contemplate like the five aggregates and then not only just contemplating it, but seeing how they're operating in your daily life, that gives you a kind of inner mental strength to then put up more resistance or more effort to overcome these kind of negative reactions, and to be able to develop your mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. So so then coming back to the mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. So mindfulness is used to be aware of the hindrances so that you can you can let go of them or reflect on them until the mind drops it. And reflecting on it means you're thinking, like if there's an itch. And you think, should I scratch or not? Well, what is this itch? I have a PhD. Why am I letting a little itch on my face disturb me? I'm a big PhD. Einstein. But yet you're getting disturbed by a little teeny weeny itch. Or something else. Doesn't make sense, does it? So when you think about it like that, you kind of chuckle and laugh to yourself. You see how stupid it is. To be wanting to move around and jerk around like a string puppet being jerked around every time there's a little thing going on. You hear a sound, always kind of going like this. You see some people doing that hundreds of times a day. That means their nervous system is in a jagged mess. And it's simply because of these habits that we've let go too long. We think, oh, it's not a problem. But they accumulate, and that's why in the Dhamma teaching, the Buddha has us, put up that mindfulness, reflect on it, and then develop the effort not to give in so much and to cultivate the opposite things so that gradually they can, because the habits only stay strong as you repeat them. And because it's just the electromagnetic energy. You keep on repeating it and it stays magnetized. And those neurons keep on going through the same neural circuits. But as you stop repeating the particular habits, that energy gradually loses its momentum and it stops. Or that energy then can be diverted into an opposite reaction of cultivating the wholesome one. But it needs mindfulness and concentration. So mindfulness is the initial mental quality, but as you gain the ability to let go of the hindrances, overcome them, and stay more and more focused in the present moment, that's how your concentration develops. You don't have to specifically single out an object and concentrate it to gain concentration. Now you could if you wanted to, but it's more difficult. And this comes down to the idea of there's two types of concentration. One is what is called single-pointed concentration, and the other is moment-to-moment concentration, or Khanika Samadhi as opposed to Anapana Samadhi. And so in Vipassana meditation and mindfulness practicing, generally we're practicing the moment-to-moment awareness. Now, sure, you can beginning through the breathing, as I mentioned, but once the breathing has gotten you into the body, the breath is no longer that important, although it's still there. But around it, you're starting to notice other sensations coming and going. So the breathing then has just become one more of other sensations that are just coming and going, and the mind expands. Instead of just seeing one little thing now, it's expanding, but it's calm and relaxed in that expanding. That's the problem. If you don't have concentration and you try to notice too many things, the mind will go crazy. But when you've gained some concentration and you become relaxed, then you open up the awareness. You've gotten that tranquilization of the nervous system to be able to feel all those things, but without any getting overwhelmed by it. So it's very interesting. This is the investigation. This is how a meditator investigates and gains knowledge about the mind directly for oneself, not by listening to others. But the Buddha has clearly laid out all these instructions in the Satipatthana Sutta. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that. Now, I'm going to finish this talk here now. And for tonight, if you have any questions for tonight's Q&A, after the 7 o'clock the puja, we want you to write them down. So will there be some pieces of paper out there?
Already, yeah.
So out on the
Registration
table. So
There's
if you
some
have any
box.
questions that came up from this talk or any other, or if during your meditation, write it down. Try to keep it fairly short, and try to write clearly or print clearly. I know nowadays the younger generation, they're using computers all the time. They don't know how to write anymore. And so us old folks can't read their writing. And so, but if you print clearly and legibly, then I'll be able to read. Okay? So now we're going to, because you've been sitting already now for an hour or so, we're going to stand up and do a standing awareness before we eventually sit down again. Now this time, if you need to use the restroom, you can go out and do that and come back. But try to keep the noble silence, don't get caught up in talking. Stay with your body.